Crystal Charter, Daughter of the Red Seal. Chapter 22. Maebe resolved to go straight back to Spaceth Manor. Her mind was overwhelmed with the work ahead of her. How many people she would need to contact, to let her father's friends and colleagues across the countries know he had passed. And how to inform all of the traders in the main she would be undertaking the trip this year. Many of the traders would be keen to strike new deals in their favour with the untested daughter of Seldom Sumine. It was expected, when the contracts were renewed under a new name, that each trader would negotiate a better deal, making small increases to their profits. Maebe had no intention of being cheated into poor deals. She was the Navig of the Red Seal fleet, the first solo Sumine, and she was going to bring pride to her family's name. Upon arrival at the manor, she listed out instructions to Jorgen, who seemed pleased to have his mistress so focused. Maebe wanted the office prepared for her to work in, and to have enough writing equipment set out for her to compose personal letters to her father's closest friends. She would use a copy crystal quill, with a base letter to inform a secondary list of people, traders, acquaintances, council members, distant lords and ladies who made purchase requests in the past. Meeting with each of the captains of her trading fleet was high priority on her mental note of things to do. She needed to discuss what her father had planned for this year's trip, and what should be changed to accommodate longer discussions with existing suppliers. Maids were expelled from cleaning the office. Maebe decided to take a small amount of time to change some personal aspects of the room herself, before she started working. She took down the painting of her mother, and wandered through the manor with the intent of placing it to watch over her father's coffin, only to stand at the door of the death room, portrait clasped tightly to her chest. Tears threatened, and a guilty anger throbbed through her veins. After a while of being unable to summon the courage to move, Maebe rested the portrait against the wood of the door. Tears stained her cheeks, and she called herself a traitor as she began to tidy the rest of the office. She had to recall that she had always been destined to one day use that room, to one day move her father's work aside and to start her own journey. His trinkets were left behind the glass cabinets, an empty spot where her daggers had rested. Red Seal contracts and charter law books were left open on the bookcases. Maebe moved some of his personal collection to replace with her own from the garden library. It took several hours of work before she felt ready to begin writing. The vast desk of mahogany held inkpots, now within her reach. Dust-covered blinds had been taken down to be replaced with curtains at a later date. It flooded the room with long-absent light. The giant globe, which told her the month and the movement of the moon, dominated the centre of the room still, but its stars were muted in the glow of daylight. Her crystal quill flowed over the paper, neatly penned letters using new inks on fresh paper. Her mind went blank with bliss. May, is there anything you'd like me to do? Sarah told me you decided to handwrite a lot of letters. I could help you write some if you wish. Maebe stilled her hand, but refused to look up from the paper. Her grip tightened on the quill, glad it was enchanted not to drip, and she took a deep breath. Sir, I've been writing for about 5 minutes. I was starting to lose myself in a simple task, so that I don't have to think about the god's cursed life I'm tumbling into. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. No, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't be here. This is not your home. You are not needed in this room, nor even in this house at all. Shouldn't you be spending your time packing for Seacrest? I assumed you'd leave after the funeral, but you seem quite comfortable still. Maebe asked, dressed with a failing calm. I am still the lady of this house. Certainly dared to raise her voice, a fly daring to buzz closer to Maebe's face. Sumine's hold no titles. You might have married my father, but you still have the True name. The last time I checked, the Trues lived a long, long way away in the West Wing. They aren't the ladies of Spesseth Manor. Maebe yelled in response to the irritation, fist slamming down by her inkpot. Specks of ink spattered the letter she had been penning. She ruins everything. Maebe had always wondered when Certainly would snap back at her. She had been waiting for the day. Certainly picked the worst time. You're right. I may not be the lady of Spesseth Manor, but when your father married me, and he agreed to marry me, May, he said this would be my home for as long as I needed it to be, and he promised me. Certainly's bottom lip trembled as she spoke, voice shaking. Just get out. Certainly turned her back to Maebe and vanished through the door, tugging it behind her so it closed with a heavy thud. Maebe clicked her teeth and waved a hand over the crystal to summon Jorgen. One more task for her mental list. End the intrusion of Lady Certainly Tarot. Mr. Scavier had been working as her father's secretary for the last 15 years. Calculating eyes, a fine nose, and pallid skin, paired with the way he sat behind his desk and watched the world, led Maebe to conclude he might have been a sickly lizard in a previous life. She'd never liked him. He lacked a sense of fun, which repelled her as a child. As an adult, she had never grown to care for him. But she would admit he was good at his job. Jorgen had sent for Mr. Scavier at Maebe's request. He would be needed over the coming weeks, especially since Maebe had to leave the country so fast. On top of the work required of him, he was in possession of her father's paperwork, including his marriage certificate and will. I'm so glad you made it down to the house so quickly, Mr. Scavier. Maebe thanked him from over her desk without raising. It would have been easier for you to come back to the dockside officers, but I'd been meaning to visit since I got word that you were back. He scowled at her from behind the tall new chair, but didn't sit down. I'll make it quick, Miss Sumine. I have the papers you're requesting, including his most recent will, updated only a short while ago, during the month of the Traveller. His shrewd eyes fixed on Maebe. He wanted to change some details to include his lady wife. Certainly. Maebe's eyebrows shot up. She can't own anything. This manor belongs to whoever is in possession of the Red Seal contract. And that has always been somebody of the Sumine bloodline, she blurted. Surprise took her that her father had once again excluded her from important information regarding his young bride. He knew it might upset you, but he insisted it was the right thing to do. Lady Certainly is to remain a resident of Spesseth Manor until the time when she chooses to remarry. She is a Tarot! Maebe spat. Fingers splayed on the desk, as though she would push through it. Yes, if you would let me finish. Your father was aware of the animosity towards Lady Tarot, and was certain that you would eject her from the manor, should the worst happen. I guess he did know me well enough, Maebe huffed in her mind, moving her hands to clench them under the desk. She has been included as a resident for her safety, as your father wished, he drawled. As for her keeping her name, that was also your father's wish. It kept her separate from any attachment to the Red Seal contract, so she could retain some status as a lady. That way she could remarry into a notable house at a later date. That was always his plan. I have spoken to Lady Tarot. She's been informed that she is entitled to stay, and I suggest you do not make demands for her to leave again. Make peace with this, Maebe. He glared down at her, and suddenly she felt ridiculous sitting in her father's chair, too small behind his oversized desk. She could barely hear the words Mr. Scavier was saying. You have inherited the house, fleet, contracts, and all the belongings your father had. There is nothing more for you to have. You are his sole heir. His only wish was for Lady Certainly to reside here. Maebe savoured the feel of each nail digging into her palm and schooled her face to calm. You are certain that there is nothing I can do to remove her from my home? There may be, but it won't be easy. Not legally, but you would be going against your father's last amendment. This is a large house, and you are away for long periods. I don't see it as the problem that you are making it out to be. The lady is young, and will likely move away within a year or two. The lizard-like, unblinking stare fixed on her, killing her argument. There was nothing he could, or would, do to help. Fine, Maebe growled. The word came out between clenched teeth. Since you are here, would you care to help me with arranging the funeral and getting updated with the fleet? If she was going to work with him, she could attempt at civility. A subject change might make the man more pleasant towards her, and she had a mountain of other tasks that needed to be dealt with. I can inform you that several of the military officers at the Genton War Base need to be informed and invited along. Selden procured food for them in Artio, and had it sent north every year. They will be sad to hear of his passing. Aside from that, no. I worked for your father, Miss Sumine, not you. The final paper I brought for you is my resignation. The man was a wave of ice water on a summer's day. She would have to find a new secretary before she left. Another important job for her that needed urgent attention. I only brought the papers you requested with me. For the rest, you should go to the dockside officers. You need to sign off on some of last year's, which were missed, deal with several complaints from captains, repairs, inspections. Of course, you need to visit the docks to assess what is most pressing yourself. He turned and strode across the office to the door. A servant with wide eyes fixated on the door as it opened for him. I suggest you find yourself a new secretary, immediately. I, for one, have no desire to work for a spoiled brat with no inclination of what work needs to be done. He lifted his chin, casually scratching behind his ear. Lady certainly somehow tolerates your presence. Maybe you should ask her for assistance this summer. Maebe felt as though she had been ground into the wood grain of her chair. Even after asking her father's vile employee for help, he mocked her. Is he being serious? His deadpan expression gave away no hint of his intention, and it infuriated her. She was swimming through her sorrow and fears, trapped under the water's surface by piles of paperwork, and there was only one face she could see through the damp pages. The empty smile of Certainly, who through some trick had managed to maintain her status as a lady through her father's death. Lizard, she sullenly muttered under her breath as the cold-blooded secretary passed through the door. He stopped momentarily before leaving, and she flushed, thinking that maybe he had heard her. She kept her gaze focused on his back in case he turned. A long minute passed in silence before she figured out how to respond to another crushing heap of bad news. One foot collided painfully with the underside of the desks, and the inks were sent soaring across her room by the flying of her hand. A cry of, "Curse fucking balls!" sounded through the manor. The Crystal Charter, daughter of the Red Seal.